Spaceship Earth has stood as an icon for Epcot since its opening in 1982, but you may not know all of the layers of the intricate detail woven into its design, which is all going to be explained in this Disfarers episode. So go ahead and sit back, because this slow-moving attraction's journey is really interesting. So after the decision to build Epcot was decided, some of the greatest Imagineers of Disney were assembled to create the signature landmark for this new park. Seeing as how Epcot was imagined to be a park showcasing the newest technology of tomorrow, Disney Imagineers knew they needed an exterior that represented science, industry, and technology. A castle wasn't going to work this time, but they knew they needed something fresh and forward-thinking. Oddly enough, they found their answer by looking to the past, the World Fair Expos, particularly the perisphere of the 39 World's Fair, the huge Unisphere world map that debuted at the 64 World's Fair, and most especially, the geodesic dome at the Expo 67 in Montreal, were all huge influences in giving Spaceship Earth its shape. Imagineers only had vague notions of what the attraction was going to be, but they knew they wanted something round. I read from one source that Imagineers considered recreating the Roman Pantheon and the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. But seeing as how neither of these could capture the essence of technology or innovation, nor are they original, I'm extremely skeptical. But I have to admit that I have no idea what other early concepts they were tinkering around with. Really, there's zero information on this. Nothing on the internet. No book has ever been written solely about Spaceship Earth. Nothing on other YouTube videos. Nowhere. Nothing except for the tiniest crumb of information stating that it was once called Man and His Spaceship Earth.
Ooh, it's here.
Eventually, obviously, Imagineers came to the conclusion that they wanted to move guests through the past to view the evolution of communication, much akin to the 64 World Fair's Magic Skyway, and I suppose it makes a lot of sense. Walt Disney had approved a younger version of this attraction in the past, and would have likely embraced the idea to recreate the only ride that wasn't brought to the parks from the 64 World's Fair while he was alive. It's a great tribute. It had Walt's approval, it felt fresh and innovative. They knew it would be liked by audiences because it had already been used before. It was a great idea that sort of bookended the extraordinary relationship of the 64 World's Fair and Disney in an innovating way that looked toward tomorrow. It's poetic. Imagineers wanted to display the milestones of communication through audio animatronics and other special effects in a dark ride. From what I can gather, they hadn't even considered having the ride be inside of a sphere or dome at this point. The ride was supposed to be housed behind it, with a big finale somewhere within the sphere. But that all started to change after they hired Ray Bradbury, the writer of Fahrenheit 451, which left such a huge impact on me as a kid, to work with the Imagineering team on the script for whatever this big iconic attraction was going to end up being. Some credit Ray Bradbury with bringing science fiction into the respected mainstream, though I would respectfully argue Jules Verne paved that particular road roughly a century earlier. Literature aside, many of the script elements Ray Bradbury created are still in the ride today, even after all of the script's revamps. In any case, it's argued that Ray was the first to bring up the idea for Spaceship Earth to be a geodesic dome, a design credited to Buckminster Fuller, and with a name like Buckminster, you know it's gotta be good. I imagine you have to really work to pull off a name like Buckminster. Interestingly, Buckminster Fuller here actually wrote a book 13 years earlier entitled Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. The premise, I'm surmising because I haven't read it myself, puts forward the concept that Earth is a spaceship that uses sunlight as fuel. There's a lot more to it, obviously, it's a whole book, but you get the idea.
I understand you.
Buckminster's geodesic dome structure was actually built and was part of the Expo 67 in Canada, which is actually still standing today at a museum called La Biosphere de Montréal, and in 2020, they added neat lights. Seeing as how it's a museum dedicated to the environment, they call it their biosphere. So, in 1978, the concept was for Spaceship Earth to be a dome, not a big ball. But Disney Imagineers, particularly John Hench if you take his word for it, wanted to take things a step further, and wondered if it would be possible to take the dome and double it into a sphere. So they went and hired Buckminster Fuller to design Epcot's big ball, which, of course, he then proceeded to do, and engineers figured out how to construct. Spaceship Earth was the first geodesic dome crafted in human history. The The Egyptians didn't come up with it, not the Greeks, no thanks to the Phoenicians. The credit for its physical construction all goes to Disney, with a lot of help from Buckminster Fuller. People like to sound clever by saying that Spaceship Earth isn't really a sphere, but two domes, one on the bottom and one on the top, which in a way it is, structurally speaking. I mean, there's a giant ring made up of 6 trusses in the center that holds up the top dome, while the bottom dome hangs from this ring as well. But last time I checked, you take 2 domes of equal size and put them together, that makes a sphere. I don't say I have 2 separate halves of an Easter egg that I put together. I just say, hey look, I have an Easter egg. And I know there are those who call Spaceship Earth a Pentakis dodecahedron, but that doesn't make total sense to me, because you should be able to start at any point and go in any direction and land at the same place on a Pentakis dodecahedron. And because of the way Spaceship Earth is designed, it's more of an oblong sphere rather than a perfect sphere shape. So, better luck next time, you dodecahedonists.
Ha!
Seriously though, Spaceship Earth is a derivative of the Pentakis dodecahedron. Now that I've essentially halted all momentum this episode had going on math, let's move on back to the center ring, because it's pretty neat. The ring is held up by 6 legs that are driven 160 to 180 feet into the ground, depending on who you're talking to. And all of the levels for the ride are held up by smaller trusses that sprout from this center ring too. The shell exterior is also connected to the ring, which by the way has 2 layers. The outer layer is the silver faceted one we're all familiar with. It was intended to be gold, but some hotshot raised his hand one day and informed everyone that gold retained heat, something that would be unwanted under the Florida sun. So they went with silver, which reflects heat. So these silver 11,324 outer layer pyramid-shaped tiles are actually a bit interesting too. They're made from what are called alucobond panels, which is a big engineering type name for aluminum composite bond. They're essentially sheets of polyethylene plastic sandwiched between 2 layers of aluminum, which makes this strong and yet light panel. Interestingly, alucobond was discovered the same year as the moon landing. Anyway, these panels actually make Spaceship Earth capable of withstanding the elements, more specifically, rain and hurricane winds. I found a source that said it could withstand a Hurricane 5, which is the strongest type of hurricane for those of you not from the region, but who knows? I do know for certain that Cinderella Castle can withstand a Hurricane 4, so it's safe to assume that Spaceship Earth can easily match that. Orlando is as far inland of Florida as you can get, so it's kinda doubtful a Category 5 would reach that far inland. Meanwhile, the inner layer of Spaceship Earth offers fire protection, insulation, and steel panels covered with neoprene sheeting. This also aids in a neat and intricate gutter system involving the outer layer, which has 1-inch gutters between the panel tiles that feed water runoff to the inner layer. The inner layer gutter system then collects the water down at the equator of the sphere and drains it down to the ground and out to deposit the water into the World Showcase Lagoon. If you need proof of this, stand under Spaceship Earth in a rainstorm and wait to get wet. Be sure to bring or buy a snack because it's not going to happen. So whenever you build something new and crazy, like a big giant ball on 6 legs, you have to understand there may be some unintended consequences, which Disney gave their all to avoid. They actually contacted MIT to get some scientists to run an experiment to determine whether the shape of Spaceship Earth would cause enough wind to blow people off their feet. Particularly children, I'm assuming. And MIT did run experiments using a 1/16th scale model, and as we all know, everything worked out fine. And anyone and everyone who saw this commercial in the 90s wondered just how the heck they got Mickey on top of Spaceship Earth. The thing is 180 feet tall. It's up there. It's around as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, with the lean. If Pisa was upright, it would be 16 feet taller, but you get my point. The answer as to how they got Mickey up there isn't exactly mysterious or dramatic. There's a trapdoor. Now don't get me wrong, I'd love to use that trapdoor and climb up there, but it's hardly a deep-seated secret. And I suppose it makes sense to have one. What if something got stuck up there, I guess? But it's just one of those things that's neat to hear about, but you can't do anything with that information. And now you get to know it too, if you didn't already know. You may also wonder if Mickey had to climb a ton of stairs to get up there though, and the answer is no. If you ever happen to notice all of the mirrors while traveling backwards at the end of the attraction, you may find it fun to know that this is actually a disguise for the only elevator shaft the attraction has. There's of course a lot more to the construction of Spaceship Earth. It took 26 months to construct, but but I think you get the point that it's sort of a modern marvel, as innovative and fun as it is amazing.
This is a lot of great info, thank you.
Now, as impressive as the ingenuity that went into the construction was, the details that went into the attraction itself easily equal it. The ginormous entrance mural was painted by Claudio Mazzoli, who worked primarily out of Milan, Italy. He was brought into the Disney fold by Mark Davis, an astounding artist I already made one episode about. But Claudio Mazzoli, though not quite as great as a Mark Davis, was nonetheless a fascinating artist in his own right, working in illustration, commercials, comics, set design, sculptures, and costumes. The piece for Spaceship Earth is 18 by 24 feet and took 2 months to finish. NASA actually provided the research Claudio needed for the spacesuit and given information about the spaceship and satellite. I love it so much I even used it to decorate my home. To me, it's easily the most powerful piece of art in any of the Disney parks. Now, there's a lot more to the music of Spaceship Earth than you've likely imagined. It was and still is really something. The music was originally composed by Bruce Broughton. Websites love to bring up his 10-time Emmy wins, but I find it more interesting that he brought us the music of Tombstone, Homeward Bound, and the Tiny Toon Adventures theme song.
We're tiny, we're toony, we're all a little loony.
He composed the music for Spaceship Earth with a 63-piece orchestra and 24-voice choir. If you pay attention, you'll notice that the music changes to the era you're in throughout the attraction. Not only that, the style and instruments change to fit into the time and setting. It's a subtle but powerful detail that is easy to overlook, and according to Bob Zalk, an Imagineer, was an extremely difficult process to smoothly disguise. The Renaissance portion was consulted with Renaissance musicology experts at Occidental College. The music, of course, varied with refurbishments, but Broughton's method of altering music carried over with every iteration of Spaceship Earth. But let's get back to business. Spaceship Earth was designed to focus on the history of communication, in no small part due to its first sponsor, Bell Systems,
Reach out and touch someone.
which at the time ran a network of telephone companies. It's also one of the longest rides in Disney theme park history. 15, 16, 13 minutes, the length varies from source to source. Yet no matter how many times you go on it, it always seems like less than 10. As I said before, Ray Bradbury helped write the narration, but he can't take all of the credit, especially since the rewrites and the revamps over the years after his death, right? There were Disney Imagineers that also did their share for that first script, and over the decades since. And it was all consulted, approved, and validated by the Smithsonian Institute. I should reiterate that the heart of the overall narration, though, belongs to Ray Bradbury's contribution. In fact, all of the information on Spaceship Earth has been verified with the Smithsonian Institute, along with the Los Angeles' Huntington Library, University of Southern California, and the University of Chicago to verify that everything, what you see, what you hear, all of it is historically accurate. Now, the attraction moves guests along through the use of the Omni-Mover system. Don't let the nifty connection pieces fool you. It's the same moving system as the Haunted Mansion and Ariel's Undersea Adventure. It was implemented in Spaceship Earth to slowly spiral you through the ages before dramatically displaying the Earth at its highest point. Which, kind of a fun fact, before becoming automated, a cast member used to have to physically turn the cars. But apparently the Omni-Mover system is more essential for Spaceship Earth than most of the rides that use it. This is because of the steep descent back to Earth. Omni-Movers get their power from an outside energy source, so it can safely control the speed. Because the cars in the system are completely joined, they're essentially a train, and therefore less energy is needed to control the descent because every car is moving at the same speed. And it's another serendipitous bookend moment here, because Bob Gurr was the one who laid the groundwork for the Omni-Mover system with his work on the Magic Skyway for the 64 World's Fair. It's like the Omni-Mover itself went from this complicated primitive system with the Magic Skyway to this futuristic, innovating transport on Spaceship Earth.
You can't hurry the future.
So when Epcot opened in 1982, Spaceship Earth proved to be a monumental success. There's really not much to go over here. It was great. No drama, no controversy. That hasn't stopped people from arguing decades later, however. There's a really weird debate as to who actually voiced Spaceship Earth when it opened. It was either Vic Perrin or Lawrence Dobkin. It's so strange, it really is. It's not like the years from 1982 to 1986 are so far removed from present day. But the information and/or any evidence as to whether Perrin or Dobkin did the first narration is just erased from history. And their voices are so similar, there are times when it sounds like one.
Then with new symbols, we unlock our thoughts from chiseled walls.
And then minutes later, you'd swear it was the other.
Let us go forth and discover the wisdom to guide great Spaceship Earth through the uncharted seas of the future.
It's bananas. Vic Perrin's mostly known as the control voice in the Outer Limits TV series.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission.
But he was also in an episode of The Twilight Zone called People Are Alike All Over.
Oh no, ours are considerably different. We built this because we assumed this is the way you people live.
If you were an adult in the 80s, I imagine you may have found Lawrence Dobkin to be a strangely recognizable and comforting voice.
More coffee, dessert, aftershave lotion?
He had been on the radio for decades before moving on to television appearances in westerns, detective shows, you name it. He was even on Star Trek The Next Generation. Currently, Disney Wiki says that Mark Eads confirmed that it was Vic Perrin, but they also claim Mark Eads was the casting director at the time for Epcot. But that may not be true. Mark's own website says he was the post-production supervisor for the Epcot Center project. Logic dictates that a casting director would be at the front of a project and a post-production supervisor at the end. So his confirmation is just as rock solid as the original confliction.
Well, which is it? That seems like a pretty crucial conjunction.
However, I was able to find out that Marty Sklar, if you don't already know the name, he was an Imagineer of some distinction and was the Vice President of Concepts and Planning during the creative development for Epcot. He later on became President of Imagineering for 9 years. Anywho, Marty here claimed that Larry Dobkin was the voice, and I'm inclined to believe him, seeing as how Larry Dobkin also narrated the Hall of Presidents from 71 to 93. And I mean, the guy was asked to come back every time there was a new president and new narration to be recorded. But I guess the jury's still technically out on that one. Given its grandeur and prime real estate right at the entrance of Epcot, it may not surprise you to learn that it is the most visited attraction at Epcot. The attraction itself was as dedicated to excellence as anyone could hope. The hieroglyphics on the walls in the Egypt scene are actually authentic recreations from real hieroglyphics. Even the words said by the pharaoh were taken from a letter sent by some pharaoh, I don't know which one, I really tried to find out, to an agent of some sort. So a pharaoh at some point in history actually said the words. Then there's the page in Johann Gutenberg's hand. This is a replica from the Gutenberg Bible that can be observed at the Huntington Library in San Marino, California. In the Islamic scene, there's this nifty astronomy navigation device that was used in the 10th century called a quadrant, reproduced from the one supplied by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Not seen very well here in this grainy footage. The steam press was created from actual patent drawings from 1863. The 20th century portion of the attraction, the Morse code message when decoded, is announcing the driving of the Golden Spike at Promontory Peak in 1869, which, if you don't know the significance, joined the rails of the first transcontinental railroad across the US. The magneto switchboard was made after an actual 1898 model. And in true innovative, forward-thinking fashion, Spaceship Earth also practiced recycling by reusing previously used audio animatronics from other attractions, mainly the Hall of Presidents at the Magic Kingdom. Johann Gutenberg was originally the US's 15th president, James Buchanan. Gutenberg's assistant was formerly the 9th president, Andrew Jackson. The mandolin player, Dwight D. Eisenhower. This scholar here, arguably the worst US president, Franklin Pierce. This Roman senator, Teddy Roosevelt. The tall priest next to the pharaoh, William Howard Taft. The centurion soldier was once Zachary Taylor. This Turk scholar, John Tyler. The fan favorite sleeping monk was once the John Adams, my personal favorite president. And the Lira da Braccio player is the daughter from the Carousel of Progress. Huh? And this isn't a detail within the ride, but it's as good a place as any to add that the original finale was intended to be a visit to the construction of a futurist moon base, which is a really astounding idea I can only hope they eventually run with in a future refurbishment. Though never used, the concept for the space station went as far as lunar rock cutouts being fabricated. Ultimately, Imagineers felt they had to scrap the idea because of forced perspective problems. My guess would be that there was a lack of space issue going on, which is fairly ironic. Anyway, the original post-show area was called Earth Station. It was essentially the guest relations area for Epcot, while remaining, thankfully due to Bell System sponsorship, focused on the theme of communication. You can make dining reservations, video chat with cast members, and something called the World Key information kiosks. The ceiling had projections of Epcot's other pavilions. You could learn all about the park and ask questions. It was neat and made a lot of sense, though it does make me wonder what the current guest relations building was during these early years. So, the first era of Spaceship Earth ran for only 4 short years. Bell Systems, the sponsor, was declared a monopoly by the government and was broken up, and AT&T emerged from the fallout, taking over Spaceship Earth's sponsorship. In the process, they made some requests for changes to the attraction, as well as the post-show area, and the first big refurbishment of Spaceship Earth took place.
It's gonna be big.
Alright, so Spaceship Earth was designed to be a ride that changed with the times. Doing so, however, is not so easy. Because the structure is so unique, the process is rather cumbersome. The corridors behind the scenes are a complicated array of twists and turns. So complicated, in fact, that cast members over the years have scrawled arrows on the walls to navigate what leads where. Because of the different sizes of the scenes, the corridors continually change in size, making the process of moving materials in and out during refurbishments pretty tricky to outright aggravating. But back to my main point here. Spaceship Earth has had a lot of refurbishments, and every major refurbishment has gone hand in hand with a new narrating voice. With the first refurbishment in 1986 came the Walter Cronkite narration. He was the voice of respected journalism, known as the most trusted man in America, and he did a phenomenal job as the Spaceship Earth voice from 86 to 94.
We have entered a wondrous new age, the age of information.
The script was tweaked and rewritten by Tom Fitzgerald, a talented Imagineer who went on to become executive producer of Theme Park Productions, and after that, vice president and senior creative executive of Walt Disney Imagineering. So yeah, it was a good script. 2 new audio animatronic scenes were added during this refurb, one of which was a young guy working on a PC at his desk. The opening fog at the beginning of the ride to mentally transport guests to the Stone Age, dissipating to make way for twinkling stars. The ending theme this time around was Tomorrow's Child. It had its own theme song and everything, complete with projected images of children. A lot of people enjoyed it. However, being a child myself at the time, I found it rather meh. After which I would quietly sing it to myself for like an hour afterward, so who knows. The post-show changed Earth Station to the global neighborhood, just as AT&T desired. So the guest relations were taken away, but were replaced with fun communication exhibits.
And that's the way it is.
After Walter came the Jeremy Irons refurbishment, which I remember all too well. He came in as the voice in November of 1994, like 5 months after The Lion King came out. So it was kind of like listening to Scar narrate Spaceship Earth for a number of years.
Since the dawn of recorded time, communication has revolutionized our lives and changed our world.
Though the producer of this refurb, Larry Gertz, who also just so happened to write the new script, said that Ronald Reagan was a serious consideration. He also says his choice for Jeremy Irons was completely unrelated to The Lion King. So in this refurb, the image of the Earth at the top of the ride was made to be 3 times larger than it previously was, enhanced for a cleaner, crisper display. The 2 astronauts that were once here were removed and transported over to Space Mountain. Line array speakers, which was a new technology at the time, were implemented. Essentially, a series of small speakers, when lined up parallel and set up horizontally, become very directional. This allowed several scenes to be set up beside one another, yet eliminated any sound bleed between them. The music was purposely changed by Larry to be an abstract, discordant jumble, and as you move through the ride and people learn to communicate better and better, the music gradually coalesces into a stronger, cohesive form. Several scenes, supposedly as many as 12, were replaced, including the Tomorrow Child's theme, with a visual demonstration of how the internet was helping mankind communicate around the globe. It was essentially strings of colorful fiber optic lights, like how many of us currently decorate our Christmas trees every year, but it dramatically got the point across very well for the times.
Not exactly what I had in mind, but not bad.
Also, an entirely new score was created, inspired by Bach's Sinfonia No. 2 in C minor. I'll play it here for a few seconds and then go back to Spaceship Earth so you can hear the similarity. It's a pretty neat twist on it, I feel. AT&T changed the post-show again in 1999 to the Millennium Celebration, which is a title doomed for obscurity because it immediately dates itself. We also got the wand, which no one asked for or ever wanted. However, we did get this neat cable tree for the post-show. It didn't last too long, though. This post-show closed up shop along with AT&T's sponsorship in 2004, stating the reason is something along the lines that the sponsorship no longer met the needs of their business. I'm often curious why sponsors leave when they're not in financial straits. If you happen to know why AT&T stopped their sponsorship, please leave a comment. Anyway, Spaceship Earth sat pretty for 3 years alongside a very gaudy and unpopular wand, without a sponsor until Siemens stepped in. It all being part of some 12-year, $100 million alliance with Disney. Okay, so after the Jeremy Irons era came the 2007 refurb, otherwise known as the Judi Dench years, which I personally feel was the best narrator. Joe Garlington oversaw this refurb, best known for his extensive title as former vice president of interactive projects at Walt Disney Imagineering. He believes his greatest achievements were the original projects Disney Quest and Turtle Talk, but I respectfully disagree. I mean, he also worked on the Ellen rendition of Universe of Energy, Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor, and Toy Story Mania's interactive components. He also had his hand in creating the load and unload section of Spaceship Earth, as well as other Epcot projects, for its grand opening. He also worked during that time on something called Tron Arcade, that was supposed to be something like an arcade of the future that never physically developed beyond a poster. But with Siemens' new sponsorship and a new refurb expertly honed, everything felt fresh and new again. There was a new ancient Greek scene enacting Oedipus Rex. And the guy at the PC, supposedly the Apple I, was put in a garage whom people love to argue over whether it's Steve Wozniak or Steve Jobs, and Disney claims is no one in particular. The Paperboy was inexplicably turned around to face a wall, selling papers to absolutely no one. The rumor being because the face to the audio animatronic was broken and horribly disfigured. Bruce Broughton was brought back to give Spaceship Earth a new score as well. The cavemen and woolly mammoth were redone with CGI. Cave paintings sprung to life. There was the introduction of the interactive touchscreen, which wasn't a new technology for the time, but it felt very much like Spaceship Earth was a part of the modern age. People were using iPods at the time. Consumers wouldn't even see the first iPad for another 3 years. It was just a fun time. Only added by your headshot being plastered onto a comical body to live out your future scenario based on questions you answered. The post-show was reimagined into Project Tomorrow, inventing the wonders of the future, which despite being too wordy, has worked out pretty okay. It only started out with 2 exhibits, but worked its way up to 5. And so, Spaceship Earth found a new high, and then it languished. There were no updates, no refurbs. For more than 15 years, the attraction was intended to have the ending scene re-envisioned every 5 years, but with 3 major refurbs over the course of more than 40 years, it's safe to say that hasn't materialized. 2017 rolled in and the deal with Siemens ended, leaving the attraction sponsorless. As of the making of this episode, you would think that a refurb was close at hand, and it was supposed to happen, in 2020 in fact, but COVID put a halt to that plan. That's why the Project Tomorrow post-show grew so dated and clunky. It's because technology surpassed the exhibits. But there will eventually be a new big refurbishment, and it has been stated that the new theme will be Our Shared History, with an addition of new scenes, an altered track layout, and new loading station. I'm guessing that means a new post-show as well.
You leave town for a couple of decades and they change everything.
And I of course have to mention the secret lounge situated just above Project Tomorrow. That isn't so secret because anyone even halfway interested usually knows about it. After Siemens left, it was used for conventions and weddings and such. When I first heard about Space 220, I actually thought the lounge had been repurposed into a restaurant somehow, which would have been really awesome, but that's not the case. I'm glad there's a table service restaurant somewhere in Future World besides the Coral Reef and Garden Grill, though. In 2021, the points of light were added, demonstrating that Epcot still strives to capture the imagination through technology, science, and innovation. I'm not going to mince words. I have issues with the way Epcot has been handled since the turn of the new century, but I believe in applauding efforts that go in the right direction, if for no other reason than to help steer decision makers to the proper course. The lights aren't exactly a new science or technology, but the use here is innovative, and innovation essentially drives science and technology. How it works is there are these main LED lights that are accompanied by what looks to be 6 side LEDs. These side LEDs are used to light up Spaceship Earth's reflective panels. It's simple, nifty, and pretty awesome. So that'll wrap up this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and learned some fun stuff. As I said, I personally liked the 4th version with Judi Dench best, but leave a comment if you feel differently. I like hearing different perspectives. And please like, subscribe, and comment if there's something that I left out. Even though this episode's done, I spent an inordinate amount of hours researching it, and I'm still interested in learning even more about Spaceship Earth. Oh, and the Morton Co. candles that helped inspire me for this episode was Soaring Orange and Imagination. Their candles are without a doubt the absolute best. I currently own about 25 myself. You can find them on Etsy. The owner's a great guy too. I actually enjoy digitally handing over my money because they're such great products. Alright, that's it. Disfarers out.